It's a very warm welcome. He always overdoes it. Makes me feel a little, feel like I have nowhere to go but down from here. So thank you for that. So first, I guess thanks for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Marcus Kennedy. My job, because most people like to say, well, what do you do? So I'll start with that. I actually lead the gaming, creator, and esports segment at Intel Corporation, small startup around the corner from here, which you might have heard of. And it's a great job. I really have a really good time in that job. But I guess more importantly for today's session, I'm also an entrepreneur. So I've spent a lot of time turning hobbies into ways to make money, figuring out how you create value and then capture that value, both inside and outside of my corporate career. And so the story I brought here for today is about my financial advising career. So like maybe some of you, I've always had kind of an interest in finances, financial advising. And really kind of where it came from for me was seeing how money could make money. My dad married a woman whose mom gifted them a house with no house note. And I was like, how did you do that? Right? Show me what you did. Because what was happening was the dividends from the portfolio actually were paying for the mortgage. And so they had no house note because it was actually paying for that. And so I learned from that and spent a lot of time kind of digging into it, learning a lot about investing, learning a lot about the market. And what that meant was that out of all of my friends, my family, I ended up being, one of those folks who you went to for advice, right? People started coming to me. I started, answering questions. And a couple of times people were like, you should kind of do this, right? Like this is like right up your alley. Now, at the time, right, I'm an engineering student. I went to Florida State University, go Seminoles, same colors, by the way, as here. So I can wear my garnet and gold and not feel out of place here. But I was an engineering student, so I had no plans on doing this thing full time, right? But, as you all know, kind of you create value where you find it, right? And so so I heard that and I was like, you know what? Maybe I should make a go of that on the side though, because I don't want to give up my career, right? And so while I was working as an engineer, I actually started investigating what it would take to actually do financial advising as a thing. And so it turns out what you need to do is you got to get licensed. You actually have to have a license, take some tests, get the SEC to certify you, as being able to be paid for your advice, which is a thing. But in order to do that, you've got to get a company to sponsor you. And so I had to go sign up with a company to go get sponsored so that I could take the test so I could get paid for my advice. That test was really hard. There were a couple of them. I took my Series 7, I took the Series 65, and a couple others. For those of you who understand financial advising, it was a few. I also took the life insurance one because I figured that life insurance was a part of financial advising. So after I did all of that stuff, the company that I had signed up with gave me a script. So if you're familiar with the financial advising world, scripts are kind of all the rage, right? You have to read the script to kind of lead people through all the questions because they need to know what to say and kind of how to understand what somebody's situation is so that you can really help them. The idea is that you need to really understand somebody's situation. But when I read this script, it was missing a lot. What it was really doing was asking, what money do you have? Where's that money? Can we have that money? That was the script, right? And I read that and I was like, that has nothing to do with an individual and who they are and what they're actually trying to go do. And when people were asking me the questions as I was kind of coming up and that led me on this path, it had nothing to do with what money that they had. What they were asking me was, hey, I'm trying to save up to buy a car. What should I do? Hey, I really want to retire by the time I'm X years old. Like, what should that look like? What should my portfolio look like? That kind of stuff. That script had nothing to do with any of that. And so I looked at that script and said, there's an opportunity here, right? There's an opportunity for innovation, an opportunity for me to do something differently. I didn't think about it that way. The way I thought about it was, this is stupid, right? This has nothing to do with what people really want to know. And so I should do this myself. And so I left that brokerage firm and built my own kind of script, if you will, and started having different conversations with people. I tested it with folks. I tested with my friends, tested with my family. And what I did differently was I started with the end in mind. I didn't ask people where they were today, right, and what they had and what money that they had and whether I could have it. What I did was I said, where do you want to go? What does your future look like? what are you trying to accomplish with money? Because at the end of the day, money is a tool, right? It's a thing that you use for a thing. I mean, I know for some of you, maybe money is the end, right? But for the most part, money is a tool, right? To use for whatever we need. And so when I started asking those questions, really, people started opening up to me, right? Versus when I was using the script, people would just shut down because it was clear that what I was trying to do was get their money. In this case, what I was doing was trying to understand who they were and what they were trying to do so that I can actually help them. And so what ended up happening was people started answering. People started showing me what they really were trying to go do. And then I could really understand what tools they needed in order to go achieve their goals. I could put them in the places where they needed to be from a portfolio perspective, whether they needed to be conservative, whether they were risk takers, whether they needed to really dive into the stock market, whether real estate was more their bag, whether they needed life insurance or not. All of those things kind of came about from the questions that I started asking. And so I took that script, started asking all these questions, and ended up having more and more people come. And then people started asking me, hey, you're really good at this. Can you manage my money for me? And I was like, well, I didn't really want to manage your money. I just came to answer these questions and get paid for the advice. So instead of a flat fee, right, they were asking me, hey, I would like to pay you to manage my money. Do this for me, right? And so I started doing that too. I started actually managing their money, and I built up a portfolio company. And after a while, it got pretty sizable to the point where, remember, I was doing all this on the side. So I was an engineer, right, an engineering manager by this point. And I built up this portfolio management company that got sizable enough that it was taking up a large amount of my time. And so I ended up saying, okay, I got a choice, right? I can continue going down my engineering management path, or I can go down the path of financial advising. And so what I ended up doing was I sold my portfolio management company, but kept the Series 65, which allowed me to still get paid for my advice. And so I started going to classes, I started teaching classes, I started doing other things and still get the flat fee for the advice, which is what I wanted to do anyway, but was able to sell off the portfolio management company. And I tell that story because a couple things. One, it shows that sometimes companies who are very successful, because the brokerage that I signed up with was very successful, right? $1 billion company. Sometimes $1 billion companies are made on the backs of just momentum, right? Catching rain, not really based on them doing the right thing for their consumers or the people who are actually buying their product. And so I learned from that that if you really listen to the people who you're trying to serve, and you really listen to some of the unspoken questions, because nobody was telling me, you're asking the wrong questions, right? But I started hearing, based on them shutting it down, that I was asking the wrong questions. And I was reading and I was like, I think I'm asking the wrong questions. And it turned out I was asking the wrong questions. And I gained that insight by actually working with the customers, actually listening to what they weren't saying, so that I can then go ask them to give me the information that they weren't telling me. And that led to the creation of more value, which then allowed me to capture that value myself, personally, instead of going to that other company, which is awesome for me. And then awesome for them too, because I helped them build their portfolios. And then at the end of the day, when I sold that, now I tell that story internally, even at the company in which I work, where my engineering career led me to. I work at Intel, like I mentioned. Now I use that same process of starting with the end in mind and kind of working backwards for career development. Because at the end of the day, people, when you ask them, what do you want to do? They generally don't know. They got a vague idea of retirement, a vague idea of a career, but people generally don't know the specifics. Just like in financial advising, when you say, hey, what does retirement look like? Where do you want to go? They're like, eh. And you got to really ask them detailed questions so that they know, so you can kind of work backwards to meet them where they are. So those lessons have been really valuable in how I learn, and I hope that this was valuable for you too.